For the first time ever, the Soviet Union admits it has had a nuclear accident, and it's clearly a major one.
Number 10. 3 Mile Island accident, $2 billion. It was the worst nuclear accident in United States history. In March 1979, the 3 Mile Island Nuclear Generating Station in Pennsylvania experienced a partial meltdown, resulting in the escape of massive amounts of nuclear reactor coolant.
The accident occurred here at the 3 Mile Island Nuclear Power Plant, a dozen miles south of Harrisburg. At about 4 o'clock this morning, 2 water pumps that help cool reactor number 2 shut down.
As a result, radioactive iodine and gases polluted the environment surrounding 3 Mile Island. Cleanup began in August 1979 and took more than 14 years and $1 billion to complete, $2 billion in today's dollars.
But heat and pressure built up and some radioactive steam escaped into the building housing the reactor and eventually out into the plant and the air.
Additionally, the accident caused the construction of many planned nuclear power plants to be delayed or canceled completely.
The idea of the men in white lab coats were supposed to know, and they're standing there scratching their heads. That, I think, shook the public.
As we'll discuss later on, while this was a terrible accident, it was far from the worst nuclear meltdown in history. Number 9. Prestige oil spill, $3 billion. Oil spills are among the most devastating types of disasters throughout history, and this was one of the worst.
The Prestige was just another anonymous ship, decaying on the high seas until one final storm found it in the world's headlines.
In November 2002, a storm 120 miles off the Spanish coast caused the massive oil tanker Prestige to leak oil into the Atlantic Ocean.
Fishing and farming were terribly affected. Dozens of supposedly protected nature areas were struck, and sea and bird life was extinguished.
The captain asked Spanish authorities to let him enter a harbor under their jurisdiction, but they refused. French authorities also denied the ship harbor shortly after. As the ship neared Portugal's coast, the Portuguese Navy towed their tanker offshore, causing it to break in half and pour 20 million gallons into the ocean. The cleanup cost 2.2 billion euros, which amounts to $5 billion today when adjusted for inflation. The insurer has been ordered to pay a further $1 billion. The disaster has also caused massive damage to the priceless ocean.
11 years after the ship sunk, we're not much wiser, even after this trial, as to who was ultimately responsible.
Number 8. Piper Alpha oil rig, $6 billion.
Piper Alpha was the world's most successful oil rig. What that means was that in a single day, Piper Alpha produced more barrels of oil than any other oil rig or oil platform in the world.
In July 1988, the massive oil platform Piper Alpha exploded and sank into the North Sea, ending the lives of 167 people in the process. To this day, the accident remains the largest offshore oil disaster in history when it comes to human casualties and industry impact.
All hell was breaking loose on that rig. It was just a scene for hell. It's the only way you could describe it.
Before the Piper Alpha was destroyed, it accounted for 1/10 of the oil and gas produced in the North Sea, and its loss caused shockwaves across the industry.
The platform's owners, Occidental, remained shocked that the result was so catastrophic that the men had no time to use any planned means of escape.
While the disaster carried a price tag of £1.7 million, which is over $6 billion today, it is still not the costliest oil-related accident in history. Number 7. Exxon Valdez oil spill, $8 billion. The world's dependence on crude oil is problematic for a number of reasons, but disasters like this one really highlight the damaging effects oil itself can have.
One of the worst oil spills in U.S. history brought Americans images of blackened beaches, dying wildlife, outrage, and betrayal.
In March 1989, an oil supertanker named Exxon Valdez crashed into Prince William Sound's Bligh Reef off the coast of Alaska. Over the following days, 10.8 million gallons of crude oil flooded the Sound, impacting more than 1,000 miles of coastline.
Neither Exxon nor Alyeska, the oil pipeline company in charge of the immediate response, was ready for such a large spill.
Alyeska was supposed to have an emergency response team at its terminal in Valdez, but 8 years ago, the team was disbanded.
Exxon shelled out $3 billion for cleanup and civil and criminal charges, and $500 million in punitive damages. When adjusted for inflation, that's about $8 billion. The environmental cost was even greater, with nearly half of the area's sea otters succumbing to the effects of the oil spill. Unfortunately, as we will discuss later, this isn't even the largest or most expensive oil spill in history.
Today, not only is it no longer the largest, but there are more than 50 spills worldwide that have surpassed what happened here.
Number 6. Space Shuttle Challenger explosion, $8.5 billion. As the first fatal in-flight incident of an American spacecraft, the 1986 Challenger disaster made history in many ways.
Let's go down to the Kennedy Space Center and take a look at Challenger sitting on the pad.
Because the space shuttle carried high school social studies teacher Christy McAuliffe, slated to be the first teacher in space, the explosion was seen live in schools across the country.
They decided to make that the first flight that an ordinary citizen can fly, and that drew a tremendous interest from the public, plus the school systems that were going to show this live on television.
Investigations into the explosion determined that O-ring seals on the shuttle warped due to the unusually cold January morning, which ultimately led to the fatal disaster. Sadly, if warnings from ground personnel had been heeded, the explosion could have been prevented. Because they were not, over $8.5 billion in today's dollars and 7 treasured lives were lost that day.
The commission concluded cold and joint design were major factors in Challenger's O-ring failure. It also squarely pointed a finger at NASA managers.
Number 5. Northeast blackout of 2003, $10 billion. A simple software bug left the northeastern and midwestern states and Ontario, Canada without power for up to 4 days in August of 2003. That included New York City.
We are in the midst of what appears to be a colossal and history-making blackout.
People trapped in elevators and buildings, they have activated the emergency command center.
While losing power at any time would be inconvenient, if not disastrous, this particular outage happened to fall on an extremely hot summer day, with temperatures of up to 88 degrees Fahrenheit. As a result, 55 million people lost access to AC.
A normal August afternoon had turned to crisis. Around 50 million people across the US and Canada were left without power.
Tragically, nearly 100 people perished due to the blackout. The outage cost New York alone an estimated $36 million an hour. The estimated total cost was approximately $6 billion, or $10 billion in today's dollars.
The official report later found it was a series of human and operational failures that set the blackout in motion. A down power line went unnoticed because the alarm system failed at the local power company, First Energy, and soon other lines were overloaded.
Number 4. Space Shuttle Columbia explosion, $17 billion. As if one space shuttle explosion wasn't bad enough, 26 years after the Challenger disaster, Columbia experienced a similar fate.
At 8:44 a.m., Columbia re-entered the Earth's atmosphere. Still, everything appeared normal.
When the Columbia Space Shuttle re-entered the atmosphere after a 16-day mission focused on microgravity research, it disintegrated, ending the lives of all 7 crew members.
38 miles above ground, the space shuttle had exploded. All 7 on board were killed. The question was, what had gone wrong?
The Columbia Accident Investigation Board discovered that when the shuttle was taking off, a piece of insulation foam struck the left wing, compromising the thermal protection system. The shuttle had cost over $10 billion to build, and cleanup cost a further $400 million. Granted, the shuttle had provided use for 2 decades, but adjusted for inflation, the total loss was over $17 billion.
Space Shuttle was designed to fly a lot of flights. It wasn't designed to last for 30 years. So we started seeing, more problems come up with it. And, we started to realize that we can't fly this forever.
Number 3, 2020 Beirut explosion, $17.5 billion. When this accident took place, the country of Lebanon was already dealing with a failing economy, soaring poverty rates, and of course, the COVID-19 pandemic.
More than 2,500 tons of ammonium nitrate had been left to rot here in Beirut's port. And when it detonated, it took just seconds to lay waste to much of this vibrant ancient city.
In August of 2020, the cherry on top of this terrible sundae fell into place when there was a massive fire at the port of Beirut. Warehouse 12, where the fire broke out, housed a deadly combination of ammonium nitrate and fireworks.
A recent report by Human Rights Watch concluded some officials were warned at least 2 weeks prior to the blast that chemicals were being stored unsafely, and residents blame the government.
The subsequent explosion killed 218 people, injured more than 7,000 people, some permanently, and displaced hundreds of thousands. Property damage was estimated at $15 billion, which is about $17.5 billion as of writing.
ما بنحب even نرجع بالوقت بالذاكرة لهيداك الوقت. especially أنا يعني أنا لدرجة إنه لليوم ما في إلي صورة عرسي ببيتي مش حاطة صورة لنا.
Number 2, Deepwater Horizon explosion and oil spill, $78 billion. As you no doubt have gathered by now, oil spills account for nearly half of the costliest accidents in history, and this one is the most expensive of them all.
BP had an opportunity to explain to the American people, and quite frankly, they blew it. He was going to do whatever he could to protect the company.
In April 2010, the offshore drilling rig Deepwater Horizon was destroyed and sank due to a massive explosion.
The U.S. Coast Guard received a mayday from the bridge and flashed this distress call.
The Deepwater Horizon on fire, with all persons off the vessel but persons in the water.
The resulting oil spill poured 210 million gallons of crude oil into the Gulf of Mexico until the well was officially sealed in September 2010. As of 2018, the loss of the rig and the cleanup of the subsequent oil spill had cost $65 billion, $78 billion in today's dollars. Outside of monetary costs, 11 workers perished due to the explosion and fire. The environmental impact of the oil spill can still be felt today, much like the impact of the final entry on this list.
Money from the Restore Act is now making its way to coastal communities to help restore the Gulf.
Number 1, Chernobyl, $350 to $830 billion. During a safety test at Chernobyl nuclear power plant in April 1986, Reactor 4 experienced steam explosions, which caused a meltdown of the reactor core.
They wanted to see whether the reactor could still be cooled if the plant lost power. But they violated safety protocols and several power surges occurred inside the reactor.
The reactor building was destroyed and radioactive contaminants filled the air, impacting the atmosphere across Europe. While the number of victims who perished directly due to the disaster remains up for debate, at least 31 people were lost due to radiation sickness and trauma.
But the fact that they've had to reveal it and admit that there are casualties suggests they're deeply worried about the scale of it.
Hundreds of thousands of people were evacuated from the 1,000 square mile Chernobyl exclusion zone, which remains largely uninhabited to this day. Estimates of the total cost vary based on scope and time frame, but range from $350 to $830 billion. Considering the lasting effects, it's no wonder this is the most expensive accident of all time.
People still work in the zone, almost 4,000 in fact. Most are constructing the huge new confinement shell. Others monitor what's left of the reactors. Many work in these offices that overlook the station itself.
Check out these other clips from WatchMojo, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.